All right, welcome everyone to the HVAC 2.0 show. I'm Nate Adams, the CEO, and we've got a number from the guild here tonight. So we have Tanner down in northern Alabama, we have Abby way up north in Winnipeg, Canada, Ken in Athens, Ohio, and then TK, of course, to keep everyone in line, whether we want it or not. Um, and tonight we're going to do something that's a bit different. And then Jeff made it. Welcome, Jeff. From Indianapolis. And so tonight we're going to talk about numbers, because at the end of the day, the main function that HVAC 2.0 serves is a sales process. And I'm always like a little bit hesitant to say it because I don't know, as a technician, it kind of sucks to hear, oh yeah, it's about sales. But the key thing here, and I think everyone here would agree, is if you feel like you are selling using this process, you are doing it wrong. So net, it ends up selling stuff, but you shouldn't ever feel like you're selling stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's more of a communication process.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to borrow from Gil Cavey of HVAC Uncensored. So it's really just communication. You're continually offering people options and then letting them understand what the ramifications of those options are, what the prices of those options are, and then asking them which one works better for you. And you go from there. And every time you do that, they own a little bit more of the process. They own a little bit more of the results. And if they make a choice that you suggest is a bad choice, they own all of that outcome if you document it well and you play it right. So this is a good way to get yourself off the hook for homeowners making bad decisions, because sometimes they do that, for better or for worse. So I threw this slide in here. Six functions of HVAC is one of the educational themes that runs through this. So like the free quote process is basically based on this. So every good HVAC system should be able to do these 6 things. It should be able to match loads, which means it will put out exactly as much heating or cooling as the house needs at that exact moment in time, which is going to be different from moment to moment, day to day, season to season. And so that typically requires, as we talked about last week, with failure to communicate, basically you need communicating equipment to do that well, because it needs to turn down and it needs to do whatever it needs. If the house needs more dehumidification at that time, it needs to run a colder coil. You can get to higher efficiencies if you run, not as warm of a coil in heating mode. Like there's a bunch of different things you can do, but load matching fundamentally requires communicating variable speed equipment. In our experience. The second one is filtration. That's just knocking the garbage out of the air. That's a good media filter. It's not an exotic thing. The bigger, the better that you can wedge in the system. Third one's dehumidification. Again, that really kind of requires communication. The fourth one is fresh air. We talked about that ad nauseum for a whole series from episode 2 through 6. So go take a look at those. We built a case because a lot of the traditional thinking we think needs to be looked at again. Right place at the right time. Change this really to mixing. This is stirring the house like a vinaigrette. So if you have a bunch of rooms that are 5 degrees different, if you run the fan at low or medium speed all the time and you stir the house, typically you can knock those 5-degree differences down to 2 or 3. So that tends to make people more comfortable, but you really want to have large ductwork that runs low static pressure to be able to do that. And then the last one is humidification, adding humidity as needed. Not always needed in every client or climate, but sometimes it is. So fundamentally, you're offering people these options and letting them know what the ramifications are and what system is capable of doing it, along with the prices for those things. So all of these things together, there's no arm twisting, there's no coercion. You're just educating them, offering them the paths forward.
We need the smiley faces.
Yeah, I should have thrown it in here, but I didn't. It's all good. But we aren't going to spend a ton of time on this piece here today. So I just wanted to at least give a quick overview of the whole thing. So the 2.0 process is based on 2 main questions. The first one is, are there comfort problems to solve? And you help the client figure this out by asking them 4 questions, and it's a scale of 0 to 10. And if they don't have anything that they want to fix, they're a free quote. And that's probably going to be 70% or so, somewhere in that range. Might be higher depending on
scores below 12.
Yeah,
maybe
Yeah,
below
exactly.
5.
It's low scores, free quote, but it's a large chunk of people do that. If their score is high, they lean towards a comfort consult, which is a paid service that collects all the information you need to really understand what the house needs. So you need to know blower door because that can swing your load calculation plus or minus 50% easily, up to plus or minus 70%. That may have caused a brouhaha here and there. Um, you want to understand what their set points are. You want to understand if any rooms are super leaky, because if you have a room that's really leaky and it needs twice the number of BTUs per square foot, you're not going to fix that with HVAC alone, most likely. Maybe you do a mini split, but that room that's a problem. It has a shell issue. So the comfort consult collects what you need there. But the 4 questions, here they are right out of the software. Um, Parts of my house are uncomfortable or sticky in summer. And notice that these are kind of a longish script. It's there to help people trigger different things that might be bothering them. Is it warmer when you walk up the stairs? Really common complaint in 2-story homes. Does it feel sticky some days, particularly shoulder seasons usually? Do you notice odors on humid days? It's a sign that dehumidification is not working well. Is any room noticeably warmer than the rest of the house? So there's all these sorts of things. So the first question is, are there any rooms that are warmer in summer? Second one is fundamentally, are there any rooms that are colder in winter? Then, are there any health issues, allergies, asthma, mold, excessive dust, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is not a yes or no, it's a scale of 0 to 10. And then the last question is, are there moisture issues in the house? So we find that typically you'll get reasonably high scores for these first 2. You'll get a 4 to 7, something like that. Health concerns may or may not be there. Typically, moisture concerns are lower. In fact, I've got a really nice data set on this that we'll look at soon. Got 400 something responses to this from a electrification course that I did. So those are the questions that help people decide and triage themselves. Are they going to do a comfort consult or a free quote? What's really nice here too, keep in mind, is if somebody says, hey, I've got this problem, there's all this stuff. If you don't have a second option to give them, your only option is a free quote. You're going to do free consulting. That's when you end up diving into things and trying to figure out why little Johnny's room is too hot or too cold. And they end up not buying anything, but taking your specification that you write for them to someone else and saying, hey, can you do this but cheaper? That's the classic path you're going to get on. So if you don't have another option to offer, fundamentally, you are going to.
Your consulting doesn't add value because
no, it doesn't. Well, yeah, it's worth what they paid for it, which is nothing.
Plus,
and you're going to spin your
wheels. They're not confident in your suggestions. They're going to get a bunch of other people out there and ask them, and they're guessing also. So the comfort consult, 25 to 30% of people asked the quiz are going to select the comfort consult, and the guys that you're looking at right here generally charge from $400 to $500 for these comfort consults. So you're actually going to get paid to go out there and
run a quote
and give them advice.
Yeah. And at that point, you aren't a salesperson, you are a consultant. And that is a main goal of the whole system, is to put you in an equal position, not a parent-child or a master-servant kind of thing, put you in equal. And that the comfort consult, just the offer helps you get there. And if you run the consult, you get that.
Well,
and then the consult,
if you run the consult, you're spending a bunch of time with these people and you're developing a relationship. And pretty quickly they get to the point where they say, oh, Jeff or Tanner really know my house. And they really spent the time to figure this stuff out. So anybody else is just going to try and sell me something without trying to solve these problems or even understand these problems.
Exactly. I see a lot of talk out there about how do you separate yourself from other contractors. And one of the best ways to do that is to offer and then do some diagnostics that are not just dog and pony. You're genuinely trying to figure out what the best path for them is.
And a lot of times you're going to be doing this comfort consult and you're going to be discovering stuff with them. And they're going to be like, oh, so that's why Johnny's room is so cold.
Yep. And then when you give them a bid, particularly out of a consult, you're going to give them a pretty detailed specification that probably will scare other contractors when they see it. So they will bid it high and your price will still look good. So there's some benefits here. But the comfort consult helps you understand, is HVAC alone likely to solve the problem? And in the vast majority of cases, that will be, or it will be enough to change the problem noticeably. And then you could do more work later, but you don't have to. But because this exists as part of the system, you know you can fix anything, because it will. You'll need a hand, but it can fix anything. All right, so let's just run some numbers. The whole idea of the show is to look at a calculator that we've built. Is it fantastic? No, but well, it's not that pretty, but it works really well, and you can actually use it to see where your numbers are and where they could be. So working backwards from goals, this is a really light goal, to be frank. But there's a bunch of small companies out there that do $750,000 in sales. So let's say you want to get to 750,000 this year, and you know that your average ticket is 4,500. I threw this together a few years ago, so this is going to be too low. Although this is kind of in the ballpark of Nexstar, from what we've heard. So this isn't totally nuts. It might be 5,500 now. But if you have a 30% closing ratio, which is fairly common, how many jobs do you need? And I mean, it's just math. You work this out. You need 168 jobs to do that. That's a lot of running. That's basically, you need to be doing some kind of a job almost every day. And this is a 1 or 2 man, maybe a 3 man top end kind of
It's very
number.
similar to what your business was when you closed it up, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, actually, no, I didn't break 400, and because there wasn't a great way with an installation company doing retrofits to get the numbers high enough to make all this work. So my closing ratio was a lot higher, but my average job size was 2,500. That was a pain in the butt.
Okay.
So I did feel this calculator personally, which sucked. So you want to do whatever you can. But if you also work this out, you need 566 leads to be able to do all of this. So you just ran 566 calls. So you're running 2 or 3 sales calls per working day. And then you've got about a job per working day, ballpark 200 working days per year. This is a lot of work to do that. Now let's adjust 2 things. So we'll change the average ticket from 4,500 to 10 grand, which is quite doable. And this is something that's happening a lot more. And the closing ratio from 30% to 65, which is on the high side. Possible, but on the high side. Note what it does. It changes how many leads you need from 556 to 115. So can you see how that is a significant shift?
If you like your wife and kids, you might get to see them.
Right? So 556 leads, to get that many, you're going to have to do some marketing. You're going to have to spend some money, which is going to hurt your margins overall. And you're not going to get that much for it. But if you can run on 115, this is something you might be able to do with word of mouth. So just throwing some numbers out there. Now, one last piece of the exercise, let's say that you keep that same number of leads, but you do change to 65% and $10,000. That takes your revenue from $750,000 up to 3.6. So this is not nothing.
3.75 would be a 5x.
There you go. Yeah. So this is a significant change. So the key thing to note here, and again, like I put in the notifications for the video, if you're doing load calculations, you're paying attention to your numbers, but those are numbers for clients. So hopefully you're paying attention to these numbers too. This is a pretty basic exercise, but it's important. And I'm surprised oftentimes how many people don't really pay attention to this. When I did this in contracting to figure out my closing ratio, it was really basic. I put my leads into a folder by year. And then I had a sold folder, and then the rest of them were unsold. And when they were sold, I'd move them over and I'd see how many total were there. And then I'd divide it by, I'd put above that how many that I had sold, how many jobs. And I usually ran between 50 and 70%, depended on what was going on.
And when we started working together, your numbers fell off at a certain point, and we realized, hey, we better check the oil or water pump or something's gone askew because your numbers have changed, and we went and fixed it. We found the problem and
Exactly.
fixed it.
And that's a really important thing to be able to do too, is to have a dashboard to pay attention. So we were doing that with a spreadsheet, which is not ideal, but it's not in yet, but there will be a dashboard for closing ratio coming up. So anyway, key thing to note here, if you hadn't figured this out already, and hopefully you have, average ticket and closing ratio, those are your two critical levers for your top line sales. And Reedy didn't make it tonight. He was out selling because it's been hot. And but this is his numbers from a couple of years ago. So doing free quotes, this is before we had anything in the free quote process at all. But he noticed that just adopting Sandler bumped his closing ratio up a little bit from 46 to 52%. He had $10,000 average jobs doing that. But in the Comfort Consult, and like this has been in the software for years now and works just fine. He noticed an 82% closing ratio and $16,000 average jobs. This is 2020, so this is before all the numbers went crazy that we've seen. So it's not 16 anymore; it's 21 or 22. So what was good for him is Reedy has 10 kids, so he needs to make some decent money so that the household works. So he got a third fewer leads in 2020, but his revenue stayed the same. And it was just because of switching over to Comfort Consults. Another key metric to kind of keep an eye on is revenue per lead. So free quotes, because the closing ratio wasn't that good, nor was the job size, it was about a $5,000 revenue per lead. Where in a Comfort Consult, he was pushing 3 times that at $13,000 per lead. So
one of the
these
things
are the numbers that are shifting.
One of the things to be cautious of here, because when you first get in, you'll be like, oh, I want to sell Comfort Consults, is you don't want to sell Comfort Consults. You want to let the quiz allow people to choose Comfort Consults.
Yep.
And this is a hard pivot to make, but when you see these two numbers, in the beginning, you're inclined to want to sell Comfort Consults instead of letting them sell themselves. Yeah. And can you guys help me out here? It's a shift in the way you got to think, right?
Yeah, well, it goes back to, if it feels like you're selling, you're doing it wrong. So if you're pushing Comfort Consults because you're trying to sell, you're doing it wrong. There's some problem that is likely to come up, whether it be owning things you shouldn't, getting people to buy things that they shouldn't, which then leads to, unsatisfactory jobs being done, and they don't feel as satisfied as they should, things like that. So it's all there for certain situations. These are tools that are meant to be used for certain scenarios. Just like if you have a flathead screwdriver, you don't use it as a hammer. Same type of scenario.
Thanks.
But if you have a flathead screwdriver and a hammer, Tanner, we're in business.
Now you can do some damage.
We have
Nate,
ourselves a chisel.
Nate, can I ask you a question? Can we back up a little bit? Can you explain what the Comfort Consult is?
Yep. So fundamentally, what you're trying to do with the Comfort Consult is figure out what the viable path forward might be by understanding what are the client goals, what does their house need, and then what is the budget for the house or for that project. And if you can get those 3 circles in a Venn diagram to cross, you probably have something that you can do. And to do that, you need to do some testing. The blower door is half sales and half diagnostic, is what it ends up being, because you're making the invisible visible to people. And then you see which rooms leak more than others, and you understand much more deeply what problems they want to solve. So there's all these pieces of the puzzle.
You get to know the people. You get to know how long they want to stay in the house, how they feel about the house, all kinds of things that you don't get to know about people with a 15-minute interview. You get to know with an hour-long interview and then looking at the house for another hour.
And then at that point, now you really understand them and their needs and also their budget, so you can actually build something for them. So it's very custom. So it's much less likely that they will go elsewhere. And
that's why the closing ratios are so high, because this is these are people that have serious problems. They're not just looking to replace their equipment. And they
It's not
recognize
tired.
that it's a 15 to 20 year commitment, and they don't want to make a 15 to 20 year mistake again. A lot of times they've made a mistake in the past, and they're like, yeah, we want to be a little bit more careful this time.
That oftentimes happens as well. You're building a nicer relationship, and what everyone here has been finding is your short-term closing ratio, say within a couple of weeks or a month, is 60 or 70%. But because you've written this very specific specification for them and created a plan for them and developed a relationship with them, over time, the closing ratios routinely land in the 80 to 90% range, that's remarkable. Like, that doesn't often happen.
A lot of these people that do comfort consults don't have urgent problems. They have chronic problems. And so what ends up happening is they're like, what do we do about this chronic problem? And then you tell them, well, it's going to be $30,000 to fix this chronic problem. And then they have to go away for a little while and either figure out where to get the money or determine whether or not, come to terms with the fact that they got to spend this kind of money to fix the problem. And so, Jeff, what's the longest a comfort consult sat out there for you before coming back?
A little over 2 years.
Okay.
Wow.
So you'll end up having a pipeline, which is also really good for business, because a lot of these comfort consult jobs can fill the slow season.
Yep. If you have someone with a non-urgent problem, you can always let them know, hey, I'd be willing to give you a discount if you'll wait until slow season. Plus, you're likely to get a better job then anyway, because I'm not trying to rush to the next job. I've got a little bit of spare time. So this can help smooth out your revenue through the years. All right. Well, I'm going to flip then to the little calculator we've built. And let's see. Actually, I will go. Oh, Ted. Perfect. Can you run it for me? So Ted won't be able to see it. And I'm going to put the link to this in the chat. And so you can see it, but you won't be able to manipulate it. If you want to manipulate it, ask for access. I won't be doing that during the show because we're actually using this one. But if you want to see it, go ahead, click that, ask for access. And once the show's over, I'll give you access. And then you can go play with your own numbers, because it's important to be able to do this.
So I'm not in that specific spreadsheet, I don't think, whatever that is. So you're going to have to do the numbers.
Oh, got it. Okay. Well, maybe I just pushed the button. So I'll just walk through what there is here, and then I'll go adjust it. So there's a lot that you're looking at on the screen at the same time. But look at the top here for starters. So sales comparison. So this is marketed leads. So these are leads that come in from wherever you market to, be that out of the phone book or Google in my business, things like that. So your marketed leads, that's one chunk. The next chunk are tech generated leads, which is your other typical ones. This is basically the reason, I think everyone knows this. This is the reason to have a service department. The service department turns into your sales department, essentially, because you get to see the systems out there that are breaking down or older, the ones that are getting due for replacement. So typically you have better closing ratios there. And then there's comfort consults, which either marketed or tech gen could go into comfort consults. And for starters, what I set this up for, if you look at the enter assumptions.
Why do you highlight the one that you're talking about?
Yeah, let's see here. Actually, I should just do that. So total leads here. This is how many leads you get in a year. So I just threw out a number here. This is a small company example of 250 leads. You're charging $399 for a comfort consult, but there are no comfort consults in how I set this up to begin. So it's set up currently for 50% marketed, 50% tech gen. Average sale for marketed is assumed to be lower because you don't have as high of a trust factor with clients. So 10 grand, 13,000 for tech generated leads that are coming out of free
Does anybody have any, do you agree with this or disagree with this? Anybody in our group, anybody watching, please comment if you'd like to see different numbers.
Yep. I'll put in whatever you want. And then comfort consults typically run more like 20 grand for an average sale. So that's the average sale line. Closing ratios, these are straight out of Nexstar. 42% is kind of a standard industry closing ratio. And then 80%, this might be high. So you know what? Let's make this 70 because that's a very realistic number coming out of comfort consults. And
how do you guys feel about that?
It's all
Jeff?
fair.
Yeah, I think like you said, starting slow. If you're looking at it, it is probably closer to 70. But the pipeline ones, depending on how your company keeps track of that number would be higher. But for all intents and purposes, 70% is probably a little bit closer to what you'll start with.
And what are your thoughts on marketed versus tech gen average sale?
It's different all over the country. So, I mean, you'll hear some people say 8,500 to 12,000. So it's depends on where you are in the country.
That's more is tech gen going to be a little bit higher closing ratio or a little bit higher job size?
Tech gen usually is higher closing ratio.
Okay,
that's true. What would you suggest setting it at, Jeff?
I don't know. I'd say if you wanted to on this one, marketed 35, tech gen 65.
Oh, okay.
There you go. And again, you can go play with this and do whatever you want. Just request access and I'll give it to you once the show is done. So average gross margin, figuring kind of an industry standard 50%. A little bit lower on comfort consults because, you're probably going to be selling much higher end stuff. So it may not be as big of a gross margin, but it should be a much larger dollar amount in doing those. But we'll hurt it for now, and it may end up being higher. So, but for starters, I wanted to give an example that's kind of mediocre,
conservative,
and then we can play with it. Yeah, definitely on the conservative side. So these are all these things in blue. This is what you put in, and then it translates to revenue up here. So yay spreadsheet. So about 1.5 million in sales using these assumptions, and you can put your own company stuff in here. This is what we've played with. Like for these ones down on the bottom, we have played with what people's revenue was and then backed into it using job sizes and closing ratios. So you can do all this in gross margin.
Right. So if your numbers are 1.5 without the comfort consult, because you're at a 0 in the yellow box right now, then this is a pretty good representation of what your company's doing. And if it's not a good representation of what your company's doing, then make some adjustments in your percentages or your job sizes until you get pretty dialed in, because you don't want to start with a bad model. You want to start with a good model. And so if this is a good model, then the next step is to see what happens if, you start using the comfort quiz and a small percentage of the jobs start converting, which is what Nate's going to do next, I think.
Yep, that's what we're going to go adjust. So pay attention to the green and the red numbers here, with and without. So this is where the comfort consult can be really nice for things.
Why don't we start with 45?
Yeah, just what I was thinking is let's do just a handful. So you can see that it'll do this automatically if you just play with the blue ones. So this bumps us to just 10% comfort consults. And look, we pick up 210,000 just from that little shift. And, we could do things
about
here like
10 grand in revenue just from the comfort consults too.
Where's
which
that
is
pop
found.
up? Oh
found
yeah,
money.
down here. Yep. Yeah, $10,000 just for running the consult. So you're making 10 grand running leads at the end of the day. Let's say you get this to 55% margin. Oh, it didn't change. We have something broken, Ted.
Uh-oh.
Well, we find that out now. Well, it did work for what it's worth. Oh yeah, it's not pulling us in somehow. You can see it because this is showing 50%. This should be the average should be a little bit under. Well, that figures after we think we get all this stuff worked out. So there you go, folks. That's the wonders of doing live shows. You get to see what happens, but then it splits it out to see like number of leads run out of 250, 113 are marketed, 113 are tech gen, 25 here. And I do wonder, where is this going in? So that's adding those up. So what is
If
that?
you want, I put in the private chat a link to the spreadsheet I thought we were going to use. And that's not
Okay.
broken.
All right. Well, I made a copy of this. So yeah, let's flip over to that. Mm-hmm. Gotta love when you do stuff like that.
Do you have the link or do you want me to screen share it? There you go.
I've got it. That should be looking at. I just had to run over and get it.
So I don't know. What were the total leads? This is the company Jeff used to work for. Their totals we were using. So this is going to be.
Yeah, I'll make it 250. We're just running a small company. Nice, easy numbers. And $399 for the consult. And then what we were running 45 and 45.
And then what were the average jobs?
10, 13, and 20. So, and I know this may feel kind of basic, but this is really how companies are made and broken. At the end of the day, it's your top line numbers are just critical. And this is how you get to your top lines for the sales department. Obviously, service is a whole other ballgame. Okay, so where are we, Ted? Yeah, now that's actually adjusting our average gross margin, so that's good because with the 55%. Gross margin on the comfort consults, that's pulling, well, here, I can click on it. So this 51% here is coming up a little bit because of the average margins. So that's what we want to see. So in this case, getting 10% comfort consults is good for an extra 135,000 in sales.
And 9,900 in comfort consult revenue,
Yep.
which we suggest 200 of that go to the salesperson, 200 of each comfort consult, because it's a fair amount of training and work. And one of the things that we found is they're going to be hesitant to make those changes. And this is a good way to do offer decline to your sales force and sort of skim the cream off the top.
Yep.
Get people that really want to do this and sort of not get people that are ambivalent.
Yeah, which is not great when that happens. So let's change. So kind of what we find the ideal ratio to be. Oh, come on, honey. Why is it not letting me?
Not letting
My
you do
numbers
it.
aren't
Hang on.
working. So in the tech gen, change that to 25% for number of
Okay.
leads. And maybe we should
Tech
share this
gen?
link. Yep. Make that 25% because then that will make Comfort
okay.
Consults 30. There you go. So by making that change and getting to 30% through Comfort quizzes, and Comfort Consults, now we're up 35%, 450,000. And these are with pretty decent sales numbers. Like if we change the average sales to like 8 grand and 11 or 12, that'll all move around as well. So you can change whatever you want in here and just
want
kind of
your
see
numbers-
what happens.
You want your current numbers to be well represented, and then you just are going to end up changing these the leads that are managed by the Comfort Quiz.
Exactly.
Because what
ends up
should
happening?
happen is, instead of being 50-50 or whatever that percentage is, a third from each of these should convert. So if this started out at 50%, then it'll go down to 35%. And if this started at 50%, this would go to 35%.
Ted, I see something in here that's not right. So sales closing ratio for Comfort Consult, it's showing 55. That should be at least 70.
Okay.
Because I was thinking the revenue increase feels too low. What we see. There you go. So again, those two levers of ticket size, average sale, and then your closing ratio, those are the two levers to pull. Any which way you can get it done. Well, not any which
Now
way.
let's talk about the Comfort Consult fee a little bit while we're here, folks. In the beginning, you might want to set this number high so that the ratio of people that are converting to Comfort Consults isn't that high, because Comfort Consults take a fair amount of time, and you're going to have to be trained, and you don't want an onslaught of these things, particularly if it's busy season.
Yeah, especially if you're a smaller company, you don't want to be running Comfort Consults in high season.
You might want these to be 800, for example, until you maybe you haven't bought a blower door and you got to hire a local HERS rater to do the blower door testing for you. And so if people say yes to this, you're going to want to be compensated for your effort until you get to the point where you can turn it into a machine. What do you think about that, Tanner?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, which to kind of retouch on just the idea of not wanting to delve straight into Comfort Consults, is the fact that you just want to get familiar and feel comfortable with doing it first. And that's where kind of, running it on your secretary, running it on, family members, techs, whoever's going to be doing it, running through it several times, kind of getting some reps in, and kind of, playing with that just Comfort Consult fee to be able to kind of keep you still have the option always there, so people can still always buy it. They're just not likely to buy it as much. So then it kind of keeps that steady flow to where it gives you time to really think about what you're doing, go through the motions, be very conscious as to each step. And then when you start to feel comfortable and you can move faster, then you can start ramping that down if you choose to.
Abhi, did you have any comments? Questions? Ken? Oh, Ken took off for a second. Yeah.
Ken has left the building. What we're really curious to see, so the free quote process is still very new, and we have no idea if it's going to significantly affect the closing ratio. It might not, but just no idea, to be frank. And if it is, it's probably going to be like 5%. It's probably not going to be 10 or 20 would be my guess. But what it is likely to change is the average sale. So we can play around with something like that. Ted, do you want to change the assumptions? Like go back to, for leads, 45, and then it would be 10. Or actually, maybe it's like 49 and 49, like basically no comfort consults. So let's back comfort consults out of the picture entirely, but then change those average sales to like 13 and 17. So the tricky part here is we aren't we really could stand to have what those numbers were. So where were we actually before? Go back to 10 and 13. So we're at 1 point, we're just shy of 2 mil here.
Almost a $500,000 increase.
There you go. Jeff was paying attention to the numbers. Yeah, so around 1.5 to around 2. So just bumping your average tickets, that's a pretty significant shift. So you can play around with this stuff for your company. And what that ticket shift would be, I mean, that's going from mainly single stagers to mainly middle end communicating or low end communicating, something like that. So mid to upper range equipment. And that's going to where everybody gets a nice filter and you get a good chunk of outdoor air ducts running. So you're just selling better equipment. You're not, there's no coercion. There's nothing negative here. People are choosing these things when you put it on the table. Back to not pushing the comfort consults. It's really tempting when you start doing comfort consults. This is part of why we really needed to have the free quote process in place, is you want to push the comfort consults because you get excited about it. Like everything's a spectrum. When you learn something new, you're like, ooh, I want to go learn or use that new thing as much as I can. How can I possibly use this new tool as often as I possibly can? But that isn't necessarily right for the client. So we had to find a way to not have people go all the way to the edge of that spectrum and then come back. You don't want to push anything here. Every time you're just like, you can do this, you can do this. Here's your likely ramifications. Here's your costs. Which one fits you better? And if you just keep doing that again and again, you have good results, and then they own the results themselves, and you get a partner in the process rather than acting as hero and owning the results of whatever happens. So, and it's funny, in doing this, I feel like I'm selling, so I need to back the hell off. But this is what we found through the years. That's that you get excited and like, oh, I want to go do that. I want to sell that.
Well, we're also excited to see how the free quote impacts numbers and impacts people's lives, because the comfort consult has dramatically impacted these guys and other people's lives. And we're hoping that the free quote is going to be easier than people's current free quote process. And so you'd be crazy not to use it, because it just protects you. It protects you by making sure that you've offered to get static pressure, and you've offered to do a load calc, and there are a bunch of things that you've offered to do that the people have declined. And you've conveyed to them that by declining these things, they're taking responsibility.
It's really a technical process that just so happens to sell. In reality, I mean, if you follow through with what you're supposed to do, you're not, being a used car salesman. If you're just asking questions, having conversations, educating, and then asking them, hey, what do you want to do? It just works out on its own. Like, you don't have to put in effort to try to go, okay, I need to make X amount of money, so I need to make X amount of sales. No, you just go out and you do your job, do what you're supposed to do, and make sure you're doing things properly, and it's just going to happen.
So the other thing to show people on this, if you scroll down a little bit, is the bottom, all these numbers duplicate. And this is sort of another place where you can do your reconciliation, so that you can go back and forth between what your current business looks like and then what the business would look like with HVAC 2.0 based on comfort consults or no comfort consults. And if you wanted to, like for your average sale, that if you click on average sale, it's tied to the one above, but you could always just type in a number and then it won't be tied to the one above. If that makes sense. Because up here, you know, it's a sum. It's given a sum.
You're muted, Nate.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Noise in my background. So this all goes back to Ted's background in financial planning. And he's definitely somewhere on the autism spectrum. So like if numbers don't line up for Ted, things are bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes me uncomfortable.
I mean, how we
If
figured
the
out how
numbers
to
lie,
size equipment
somebody's made a mistake because numbers just shouldn't lie.
Yeah, good numbers. Math is math. As my friend Alexander is like, so we have to check out if the maths. And this is definitely one way to check that. And it grows out of, surely at this point, you've heard us talk about load calcs and doing things based on reality, not based on theoretical calculations, because we find that man J for heating is usually about double what reality is. It's pretty close. Like, is it always double? No, but it's at least you can. I mean, it's 50%. You can, if like 50% too high. So we figured that out by watching energy use before projects and after projects and making predictions and understanding what was happening and looking at runtime. So like Ecobee, there's all sorts of things there. Yeah, this Jim Kohler. I see that. It's figures don't lie, but liars can figure. We're trying to make sure that the figures don't lie in everything within 2.0. We want the numbers to all be real, whatever that number is. And this comes out of Ted's anal retentiveness for numbers. I mean, like thermostat setbacks. Ted, you were arguing against those. What was that, like 09, 10?
2009,
and now,
2010.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't save significant energy, or if it does in a house, it's because the house is incredibly screwed up. But then you make the people less comfortable, which oftentimes leads them to do other things.
Doing all kinds of crazy things.
More. Yeah. And I noticed that with our last house that had a boiler in it. If I ran big setbacks at night, the house burned more energy, not less, because I ended up running higher set points during the day to get all the surface temperatures warm enough to where it made sense. So you had already built an intuition around that from looking at numbers. And this calculator, this spreadsheet is the same thought process behind it. Let's see where the numbers match up and what happens. And we've had enough experience, particularly with comfort consults, to have a pretty good idea of what happens to companies. And like, it's not that difficult if you run the system well to darn near double your top line sales with the same volume of leads.
Well, the other thing that should be making people uncomfortable right about now is if you don't ask these people these questions and give them the option of getting a comfort consult, knowing that our guys, by asking these questions, get 20 to 30% of people getting comfort consults, it means that you're not offering a service that your clients need. And so you are not serving 20 to 30% of your clients. And that should make you somewhat uncomfortable. Yep. And then on top of that, if you decide to do this, it's going to be a big shift, because you really can probably only do one comfort consult a day. It's going to take your whole morning, or it's going to take your whole afternoon. So if you're going to do anything else, you could do maybe 1 or 2 free quotes that day. But if you try to do 2 of these in a day, it's not going to work. So you're going to have to make some adjustments to the way you run your business if you want to do this. These are some of the things that, our guys, like particularly Jeff, because Jeff did for a while there, he was doing 6 or 7 comfort consults a week. And then we had a little conversation about it, and then he backed it up. he backed it off to 4 or 5, and his life got better.
Oop, I'm moving that around.
So there are going to be things that if you decide you want to lean into this, you can go slowly, and we'll help you go slowly. But it starts out using the free quote. We hope, as we get this free quote process
Finally
launched,
dialed. Yeah. It keeps being on the edge.
and probably offering the comfort consult for like $800, because if you don't have a blower door, you're gonna have to find somebody that has one.
Yep.
And borrow it or rent them, get their help, partner with them somehow.
There's going to be a lot of pieces of the puzzle to do that sort of thing. So for starters, you want to run just the free quote process and have
Practice
that
the
help
free
you
quote.
responsibly avoid responsibility, and also just get used to the process, because it's a script. So you talk about, I hear some trainers talk about word tracks for whatever reason. I know I don't like that, because years and years ago, for a short while, I sold cars, and I learned from Grant Cardone, and he was talking about word tracks, and I still don't like that phrase to this day, because it felt
So those are
not
coercive. Those are coercive tracks.
yes,
And
yeah,
and the fundamental difference is this is a completely non-coercive tract. Both the comfort consult and the free quote are about making offers to people that are to some extent you want them to decline these offers, because it goes back to that I want the least amount of responsibility clip from American
Possible.
Beauty.
That's exactly it. So I think next week we'll run through these, but I just wanted to at least flash this on the screen, because again, we like to collect numbers wherever we can. So I did a course on Electrify Everything that's been out for about 2 years now. About 1,500 people have been through it. Now, how much they consume, can't tell you, but I've got 1,500 emails from it. And early on, I ask the 4 questions. So these have been around for a while. And so 468 responses. And this is for summertime. Look, there's a lot of 7s and 8s. And there's a pretty significant number of 9s and 10s. So we view anything 8 and higher as just one question being 8 or higher, triggering a comfort consult. So that's 17 plus 5 plus 6. Was that 22? So this is almost 30% on this one question alone. Technically, this would trigger comfort consults. Not that they would choose it, but by our
You would say, look, that's a high enough number. Are you willing to lower that number? Because if you're not willing to lower that number, our recommendation is a comfort consult.
Exactly. And heating has even higher numbers for it. So, and again, this is a lot of responses. So when you're getting to this number, this is pretty good.
You're going to make a 15 or 20 year mistake, it sounds like to me, based on the number you put.
Yep.
If we don't slow down and figure out where these frustrations are coming from.
Right. That's as opposed to just sticking with the same size equipment that they have, which is contributing to these discomforts that they have.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Making it clear to the customer that here's what you've got. These are the conditions that you're living with.
They ain't getting better.
Right.
If you do like for like.
New equipment is not going to alter those conditions in your house. It'll be the same as it was.
Sometimes,
yeah,
and sometimes make it worse.
Might make it worse with the ECM blower motors, and if your static is out of line. Oh, you didn't want to pay me $25 to do a static pressure test? Okay. The equipment that I'm giving you a quote on is all frowny faces.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? 70% of systems are over 1/2 inch of static, and 47% are over 7/10. So 7/10 being kind of the consensus of where early failure risk begins, and half of systems are out there. And then Jeff, you've tested a whole bunch of systems and found before and after when you go from PSC to ECM, what's the change again? How much does it go up?
30% increase.
So if you have a 0.3, or sorry, a 0.7 static number, you're going to be over 0.9 afterwards. If you go from PSC to ECM, so
It should be sobering, guys.
Yeah.
It should be
And-
sobering. If you,
Yeah.
you're pulling out a 0.7, system. You certainly want it to be the homeowner's decision and understanding that they're taking that risk.
And also take in consideration what it's doing to the system, because the static pressure goes up for a reason. It goes up because you're actually moving more air. So on that old system, if it's already high, your PSC is just losing airflow. Well, what happens then? Lowers your coil temp, it dehumidifies better, lowers your sensible heat ratio. You put in a new system, static pressure goes through the roof, it starts actually moving the right amount of air. Now it's running a warmer coil. What happens inside the space?
Oh,
Now-
right.
Yeah.
Now your relative humidity goes up. People are less comfortable. They're bitching at you. You're out there doing free warranty work.
And so then they're asking
Yeah.
questions. Why did I keep it at 70 degrees before, and now I've got to keep it at 68 to feel the same?
And now you start getting them close. You might have just tipped the cart and turned their house into a mold farm.
Mm-hmm.
My house never had mold before.
And if they're not aware of that's a potential risk, well, then they're going to blame you. But
And,
if
and
you,
it's kind of justifiable if you haven't documented that you
Oh,
offered the
It-
steps to avoid that problem.
oh yeah, it absolutely is, because you sit back and you watch them walk towards a cliff and you didn't say anything. It's not your job to keep them from jumping off the cliff. You just have to say, hey, you're about to die. Are you okay with that? There's only so much you can do. But if you don't do anything, I mean, you're justifiably at fault at that point. And that's the damage people take.
Yeah, there's a lot of that risk that is coming up. I mean, that hence the last couple of episodes talking about the IRA and how those programs are going to increase our risk for creating unhealthy homes for clients when we give them what they ask for, because the program is shifting what we can offer. So yeah, there's all these pieces to the puzzle. It's complex, but at the end of the day, when it comes to your top line numbers, it's about your average job size and your closing ratio. So that determines your sales, and then you better know what your margins are, or have some idea what your margins are, because that determines largely your profit after that. So what we're trying to do here, the prime directive of HVAC 2.0 is to provide great experiences for both contractors and homeowners, and in equal measure. Like I talked about last week, you can hose one side or the other. That's not that difficult, but to serve both of them equally and well is incredibly difficult. And that's the balance, the razor's edge that we are searching for here. But it's also important that you have some idea of what the numbers of your business are. And that's what this episode's about. So if it's boring, sorry. But this is really critical. This is the difference between making it and not making it.
Yeah, well, if you're in business and this type of stuff is boring, then don't worry. It's okay. You're not going to have to worry about it for too long.
You'll be back to being an employee in no time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is very 101 business stuff. And so it's important to at least have some concept of these things.
Well,
So Nate, I had a question. So actually what Tanner said made me think of this. So if you own your own business, right, or you have skin in the game in your own in your business, I can see how these numbers can add value, and you need to keep track of that. But like, what if you work for a large company that is just sending you out on jobs and you're a tech person? Is there ways in which you can use this to still maybe leverage more, I don't know, just better opportunities at work or get ahead? Like, how do you, Jeff, I see your hand up.
Yeah.
Less warranty, or at least less chargeable calls or $0 tickets. as an employee of a company, especially large companies, if you come out with $0 tickets, you have a manager that's up your ass. So again, if you have something that's in place that you can responsibly avoid responsibility that's been declined and documented, that gives you the chance to go back and go, well, hey, you declined this. You didn't want to do it then. What would you like me to do now? And then you can offer them solutions. So
Yeah, so Abhi, that's
kind
a
of
key
affects
question.
everybody.
Yeah, there's two main users here. There are owners of companies that are looking to grow. And if you're under $1 million, this could definitely be useful. But if you are between 1 and 3 and you want to break 3, you're going to have to create processes for people, or else you just can't grow. You're going to forever be putting out fires, and you're going to be forever in the field. You're never going to be able to get rid of enough hats to actually grow. So this is meant to be a process for newbies that you can put out in the field, and they'll actually do okay selling, because we're going to have labor shortage forever, is what we're looking at. And the other one is what
Hopefully you'll be able
Jeff
to
and
tell
Reedy
if
are.
the guy has technical chops, because how hard is it to teach him to run a blower door? No,
Yep, you get to learn that.
goes to it like a fish to water, then maybe you send him to more technical stuff. And how well does he do with the homeowner? With a week or two of training, you can send a guy out doing this. So you don't have to spend 2 months getting him trained up and then sending him out with another tech at for 6 months or whatever, however long that works.
Yeah, this can potentially shorten training cycles, and also, like you said, figure out which
vetting
folks should be in which seats. Yeah,
shorten the vetting part of the training cycle.
Yep. And then the other good use case here is what Jeff and Reedy do, which is they are fundamentally salespeople. They're former technicians, so they have very good technical chops as well. But they are dealing with the leads coming to them and then putting them through the questions and the system, and helping clients triage themselves. So you can run this as just a salesperson in a larger company as well. So owners on one side looking to grow, and salespeople on the other looking to A, sell more, and B, have fewer callbacks on their jobs and not have their manager driving them crazy for it. Although some managers don't. 4-ton Mike.
No, that's not warranty that I said. They just relied on other people to take care of.
That's true. Yeah.
Whipping boy.
Yeah, that was crap rolls downhill, and somehow you ended up at the bottom of said hill. So that wasn't great. But yeah, those are the two main use cases. But even if you're a salesperson, you should really understand your average tickets and closing ratios. Those are really important metrics for being able to grow and understand. But if you're an owner and you want to grow, you've got to be able to train salespeople. And this comment just came through. I keep forgetting to put that thing. If you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, it will give StreamYard the ability to see your name, and then we can see who it is. So just got to get someone to train them. Yes, this is an automated system, though. So between the onboarding and the fact that the whole thing is scripted, the training is there on the sales side. You're going to want, if somebody's really new, they're going to need to do a couple of ride-alongs, because that's silly to just send somebody out, and they should probably go run a trial run on the CSR or salesperson or a family member or whatever it might be, friend, so that they aren't nervous as they do it, and they aren't trying to read all the notes and the tips as they go, so they don't look like idiots as they're doing it. Although to some extent, sometimes it's good to be like, folks, I'm new. I think about my aunt and uncle showed up in a new car years ago, and they were telling me about the kid who sold it to them, and they basically forced the purchase, because like, we just felt bad for the kid. We wanted to make sure that he made the sale. And sometimes it's good to trigger those feelings in homeowners. So being new doesn't suck, but you don't want to be so new that you're incompetent. You want to be new and nervous. That's where the Columbo side of things can actually be helpful. If you're overconfident, it can be a bad thing. Okay.
Well, I think we can end and then do kind of open map with the guys.
Yep. After show time. So thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any comments, put them in there. Make comments on the video because it'll be up in just a couple of minutes. And thanks for coming. We appreciate y'all.
Like and subscribe.
Good night.
We need 1,000 subscribers.
There we go. Yeah, let's get the monetization. Exactly. All right. Thanks everyone for coming. You know the deal. Subscribe and then hit the bell so you get notifications. Good night, all.
Good night.